We have snuck into Lian Li's underground secret lair. Allow me to give you the full zoomed out perspective. It's under construction. We have a couple cases to look at. So this is a different room than we've shot Lian Li's stuff in the past, which is because they're moving. But for the showcase, the stuff I'm interested in today, mostly is going to be in actually the Lancool series. It's really piques my interest the most just because pricing. So Lian Li's got an $80 case that we'll spend a lot of time talking about. They have wood paneled case around $120. So this is definitely going to be a theme for this year where we've already seen wood on, I think, 3 different cases now from different vendors. There's a wireless RGB solution, which I cannot unplug, but there's basically a USB stick that goes into the back of the board and tries to eliminate as many cables as possible while using a transmitter. Oh, actually, it's right here right now. So it's got a transmitter receiver set up, and that plugs in here, which then feeds into the board. So cover that. There's some updates to the 011 series with these in the middle, but again, the Lancool is where we're going to start today. So we're going to start with the Lancool series. So this is the 207. The reason this interested me is because historically the Lancool series, so like the 216, for example, generally goes for a budget level performance category of case, which doesn't exist too much these days. Of course, it kind of has the 4000D as one of the better things they did. But Lancool's generally been competitive there. This one, I'm just going to pull all the pieces off first. You might be asking what the plastic covering the plastic is for, and currently nothing, but maybe DLC. As we get into the case though, so there's 2 included 140 ARGB fans, and then pulling the side off, there are 2 reverse 120s down here. So this is actually why the case is somewhat unique, where the power supply is shifted to the front. The reasoning being that Lian Li is trying to fix one of the problems we've kind of talked about in some of our reviews, where if you have a power supply shroud, you've got a power supply giant brick back here, you mount a fan maybe up in this direction, there's really not much access to air. So some of the cases like that we looked at earlier in the show have paneling down here with mesh to try and pull air in through the side, but even still, they end up very high in the case. That distance from the mesh really prohibits intake. And so what Lian Li is trying to do, actually, if we look at this empty case up here, is move the fans closer to the GPU, where if you have a horizontally mounted default configuration and bottom intake fans that are unrestricted by the power supply, in theory, you should get pretty good access to air. We'll do testing on it, but I mean, generally speaking, the closer the fan is to the thing it's cooling, the better it's going to do. So relying on only front is never going to do as well as trying to get some kind of back or bottom intake. So that's kind of the main change here. And using the reverse fans is, I mean, this is kind of really the main place you see it, like in the C8 ARGB, for example. For the rest of the case, so they've also shifted the motherboard tray down. So this has about 65 millimeters of clearance up top. Moving it down gives some room for the modern trend of larger AIOs plus fans. We're going for thicker radiators, thicker fans. It's currently what most of the high-end coolers are trying to do. So even in the liquid freezer 2s, for example, you saw the thickening of the radiator. So more accommodating for those. And then actually, as we kind of pull this panel off, let's rotate it a little bit, you'll see, first of all, mesh over here, which is really only to feed air to the 2 fans, which are mounted in this area. So the whole point of this is to have a sort of vacuous chamber, just a large open chamber for air. Now, one of the considerations is this fits 3.5-inch drives down here. If you populate both of those, you're going to fill some of that air volume with a bunch of metal. Like, it's not too hot but warm. That will create some more resistance, so you need more pressure to overcome it. But generally speaking, the point is just to have a big hole in the case to bring air in. And you can see back here as well, they've kind of brought that through to the rear panel, where, as we've seen in like the H510 series, for instance, having rear intake for the GPU is actually extremely beneficial, which this will serve as, because that air is going to come in through the back, go up through the fans at the GPU. So pretty interesting design. Definitely want to test it. pricing at $80 is very competitive these days. There's not a lot of $80 cases anymore that are good. So there's always going to be some sacrifices in a few places. But the kind of main direction for this one is going for a more compact build as well. And just kind of bringing it all down, where Lian Li was telling me the objective was get it as close to micro ATX as possible for sizing without actually being micro ATX. So still fitting normal GPU, fitting ATX motherboard. So a couple things on this are not final, like some of these hinges on the back, but the case is supposed to be shipping later this year, so it's in a relatively final state. Now, one of the key areas, if you go from horizontal down to vertical and use a more restrictive plate like this one, there's not a lot of holes in that, so it does end up blocking a lot of the benefit of the two 120s that are hosted down there. You'd want to get something that's more perforated to really make use of it. But broadly speaking, definitely want to test the 207 because previous Lancool cases have done pretty well on the bench. And like I said, we get a ton of $200 plus cases these days to review, and not a whole lot that are in the $100 range. So we'll be looking at this one more later. So for this case, you should be hearing more about it in August when it launches and when we start testing it. I think that mostly covers this one. Honestly, most interesting or exciting to me is going to be that case. 217 is pretty unique for its own reasons, though, which is primarily because of these 170 millimeter fans. So 160s have shown up in cases before, getting a little more popular. Again, the C8 uses them for the RGB variant. 180s are on things like the Torrent, and then your more standard sizes everywhere. So the 170s, basically, Lian Li is trying to occupy more of the front space without scaling up to a large 180 size. And I'll just show this feature first, actually. They've wired the reset button on this case currently to do a reverse spin. You saw the fan stop there, spin backwards. The goal is to eject dust, basically, because what they are doing is using an ultra-fine mesh front panel, which is somewhat common these days. No dust filter in here, which is actually how we prefer to see them. And in this construction environment, it's already getting heavy use. Now we pull the panel off. The dust filters, if you wanted to leave them installed, end up back here. So you can actually see this. This is not 100% final, so they're trying to line up the struts on the filter with the struts on the fan. But the point, those are definitely getting use in here. The point, as I understand it, is apparently this performs better this way rather than having it up front. Okay, so I'm joined by Jameson to talk about some of the dust on this, dust filtering. Okay. Because the question I had was for the reverse spin, how actually powerful is that?
Yeah.
And why don't you walk me through what the expectation is?
So the reverse spin is not to pull in the dust from the inside of the case. Mm-hmm. It's more for like shaking up the dust around the fan itself. Mm-hmm. So over time, you will see that the dust, it's on the backside of the impeller.
Right.
And sometimes like you will find that if you use the, I don't know, like the wiper to clean up, it's not easy because the shape is not like a flat surface, mm-hmm. right? So our idea is to using this reverse spin to kind of like shake away the dust to make it onto the dust filter. So at the end, our expectation is once you do this reverse spin, the only thing you have to clean is the front dust filter and the back dust filter, and that's it. Yeah.
So one of the things you guys were telling me is that was it this case you want to polish the blades on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what's the reasoning for wanting to polish the blades?
The polish the blades is also like try to have minimum dust onto the blade itself as possible. Yeah, but still, like for small particle, it will still be on there. That's why the reverse spin it's useful.
Yeah, to loosen it basically. Yeah. And then for filters on the back, so this is something we were also just talking about with earlier. I thought you were telling me that it was for increased thermal efficiency to move them back there. It sounds like you're going for increased dust capture efficiency.
Yes. So at the end, this kind of like if you put in, doesn't matter if you put in the back, if you put in the front, it will still hinder the airflow, right? But what we found is like even with like this strong CFM, like some users that actually wants the dust filter rather than the high performance.
Yeah, right.
Because they just end up have to clean up over time. So the idea is
GPU and CPU tower cooler a lot.
Yes.
More effort to clean.
So this method, it's you will actually efficiently stop dust from coming in. So if you put it in the front, doesn't matter how dense it is, still there will be some like travel ins, right? But this it's more efficient to actually stop it.
Right.
Yeah.
So the plan is walnut for this. This is a prototype. It's kind of dinged up and not perfectly aligned. So we'll have to let that bake a little longer, see how it comes out. Pricing supposed to be $120 on the 217. So in addition to the 217s, includes a 140 in the back, supposed to ship in September. And then one of the questions I asked was, for these front fans, why gap them like this? Because you could push this one higher up and theoretically feed more air into that GPU compartment instead of sending more of it into the power supply compartment. The fans that are currently mounted to the top of the power supply chamber are not included, but if you take them out, it's still going to be perforated. And so Lian Li's explanation was that by feeding more of the air into the power supply chamber lower down, I guess this is my interpretation of it, but you're able to get that air further along, closer to the GPU core itself, feed the air to the back of the case, which this region tends to be somewhat starved. And actually in a lot of our testing, you can see in smoke and FLIR imaging that GPUs, the fan back here, will pull air if they have access to it through the back of the case, like through these holes here. And so if you're pushing more in through the bottom, coming up through the power supply shroud, theoretically it gets you a little closer to the core itself. So that was the reasoning. How much it actually matters, I don't know. You're talking kind of small differences at the end of the day for a lot of the stuff, but it adds up. So that is the 217. Okay, so now we're jumping over to the wireless RGB stuff. So Jameson's got a background in design and was very excited talking about the solution, which is why I wanted to get him on to walk us through this. So top level concept is get rid of as many of the wires as possible, because RGB wiring is one of the worst things to ever happen to computer building.
Yeah, so we are moving forward from a physical controller that connects the fan or the Streamer Plus. If you want, give you an example. So I will point out here. So actually this one, take a look. So this is a typical setup. Like if user use like Unifan and also like a Streamer Plus, so you will have a controller that connects to the controller itself, or like this or like this. It's not plugged in right now, but actually for a lot of users, like this will be a headache because they have to plug everywhere. They have to have a fixed place for the controller because of the cable length.
Yeah, you have to mount the controller somewhere, and then you also have to run all the wires to it.
Exactly,
so,
yes. And what we're doing right now is, because basically for RGB device, you need two things, power and signal, right? So for power, we go back to the roots. We use motherboard as the main power source.
Okay.
Yeah, so the fans.
Just 12 volt and ground?
Just 12 volt and ground. So basically, this is the power cables.
Right.
That for fans, that this.
4-pin header, but 2 wires.
4-pin header for 2 wires. Because the motherboard has, I don't know, so many PWM 12 volt headers, either like 8 or 9. And it's scattered in different places. So I think it's very good if you wanted to set up like this. You have headers in the bottom, header on the side, header on the top. So basically you plug this onto the motherboard 12 volt headers, and this will get power for both the fan and RGB. Because this small modules right here, so this one has some decoding, and every fans has
was this the transmitter or receiver?
A receiver.
Receiver.
Yes.
Okay, so you have a transmitter receiver setup, I guess.
Yeah.
So the receiver attaches to the end of the device.
Yes. Yes.
And then this is the host.
Yes.
So the actual USB right now is just a 3D printed kind of shell. What are the components that are actually like in each of these? So in the host and then in the receiver. You know, if you were to open these.
So D has an decoding IC. So basically, translate the signal from the host to the fan, so you can actually read it as an RGB signal or a PWM signal.
Okay.
Right. And also, it's they actually both way, because the host also receive information from the receiver that tells the host which fan is it, the size of it, if it reversed or not.
And how is it transmitting?
So it's
I mean, Bluetooth or
2.4. Yeah, 2.4.
So then what made you choose 2.4 gigahertz? Because the first thing I think of we deal with this all the time for the microphone packs is interference, right? Like we get in a new area like the convention center, and it's gonna be just remapping the frequency to try and avoid interference. So why 2.4 versus other solutions, right? Like as opposed to say, we talked about it, but 5 gigahertz, right?
So one thing is the cost. The other is to cover wider range. So all the because think about it, like if you have like your host in here, everything is inside the case. Then there are so many different channels that you want to cover it all. We figured that the 2.4 doesn't make more sense, but the 2.4 has the problem that you described. It has the interference, right? So what we are doing right now is to try to avoid this, interference. To make sure that there is no like no stop of the signal, so that the patch can be lost or like the binding can be lost. So still working on and polish it.
Is it? You said maximum 8 devices right now.
Yeah,
so it's a
8 device.
1 to 8.
1 to 8. Yeah.
So what are the challenges with doing that? With juggling 8 receivers.
So the first is this device. Over time, like the stability test that we're doing it right now. Like after a while, like some device will like lose its binding.
Sure.
Yeah. Also, if you like trying to like enhance like the signal range, you might end up like scanning more device. You know, so that can be one thing that's hard. And then the other is we're trying to make 2 controller inside a PC. And how do we avoid that this controller can collide or like interfere with each other? So that's something that we're also working on.
So do you think you have a solution figured out for these problems? I mean, you're working on it, you say, but do you have a concept in mind to solve it yet?
Yes. So for like patch losing, what we're doing right now is we actually send the signal like twice at a time, and then receiver have receive like twice at a time.
So it has 2 opportunities to catch it. Okay. Yeah. So then if it misses one, I guess it doesn't matter. Yeah, and then if you talking about interference, so basically we write into the firmware that when there is like the same frequency, then we just jump into the next, to make sure that it's not going to, be in the same frequency at the same time. Yeah. So basically scan for more ranges and occupy some unoccupied range. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Cool. So up to 8 devices. You end up cutting down cabling and plugging into the board for just 12 volt and ground, or probably the board anyway. No more hub.
So this is the PCB. It's both sides.
Yeah.
So this side has this
USB
Type A headers.
Yeah.
The other side is plug headers for the 2.0 on motherboard.
It's just like half of a 2.0.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Got it. Cool.
And also wanted to point out that the reason of we doing this is because we get this complaint all the time. Like people says, I love to buy your new fan, but can you stop me buying this new controller, please? So we really put in the efforts to think about this.
So you told me, before filming, you told me that the plan is going forward, everything will work with this.
Exactly, yes.
What makes backwards compatibility not possible?
One is the power consumption on the motherboard headers, because we really want to push this idea of just use the motherboard as the power source. Yeah. But each P-type headers has about like 1 or 1 to 2 amps, and we really need to customize an LEDs and then fan and the pump of the fan, the motor of the fan. So to keep it within the range. 3 of it within the range of the 1 amps regulator. Yeah,
I think typical headers 1 amp, and then there's some high amp power headers that do 2. But there's not many of them. So okay. What about the 12 volt and 5 volt? we were talking about, you need
Yes,
conversion, right?
Yeah, you need to have that embedded onto, because this fan only gets 12 volt, right? And you need like and a converter actually built in within the fan itself.
So does that end up in the hub?
Yes. In the
Okay.
hub, yeah.
Just on the PCB basically back
exactly,
here? Okay.
Yes.
Got it. Cool. I'm afraid to bring up pricing with these fans,
Yeah.
but so where do you end up with for a 3-pack?
3-pack. Right now, the SLV2 is $89.99. The V3 is going to be the same price.
Okay.
It's going to be the same
All right.
price.
Cool.
So, and it also, you mentioned it to me, why is it the same price? Is it going to be more expensive on the IC?
Right.
Yes, but you know, you lose the connectors on the PCB. Also, overall size is smaller. You don't need big amount of flash
Storage.
Yes.
Yeah.
So basically, that saves on cost.
Yeah, so
equalize.
you basically cut down some of the
Yeah,
cost elsewhere,
exactly,
and then
yeah.
you bring in new costs, so
Yeah.
it ends up the same. Okay.
And I think also over time though, like, because I imagine like when people buy this SLV3, if we introduce a new fan, they can just buy the fan. They don't have to buy in separate controller.
What is your end game for LEDs and LCDs? What is Jameson's vision of the world of computing in 10 years from now? Is it actually just a giant screen? Are the cases just made of screens now? You know, where are you taking it?
That's hard to say though. Like, but I feel it this way though. Like, I think PC is more about individualism and then personality. You
Sure.
know, if it's just like custom computer, if you just make it simple, then I don't know. Like, did you feel like that's kind of like a Dell HP kind of style? Then what's the point of actually build this custom PC yourself?
Yeah, so car culture type stuff. too.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for the walkthrough of this.
Maybe the last thing.
Yeah.
Though, so this one does have two SKUs. One is the non-LCD, just regular, the SLV3, one with LCD. One big improvement that we do with this over the previous TL is that now you can actually hook the regular with the LCD. So user complained to us that I have to buy 3 at the same time to occupy this space. So
Right.
that's expensive, right? Right now you can choose just one in the middles, just to, I don't know, show your temperature, your picture of your face or
Right.
something.
Yeah. Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Release date for the.
I would say like end of August.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Cool. I think that pretty much wraps it up. So,
Yeah.
thank you, Jameson, for joining me.
Thank you.
And we'll have a lot of coverage of Computex, so check back for all that. Ton of cases this year. We'll be talking about as many as we can, and we'll see you all next time.